for a statewide get out the vote thing. It was a lot of fun. We had our laptops sitting on music stands, which are ubiquitous. They're useful for everything. So, are we close to good to go?
Yeah, we're good to go. Thank
All
you,
right.
Paul. Let me just get my questions. Okay, so how long have you been working with Warner Park?
Quite a long time, actually. I lived down the road. Used to live a little farther away since moving back to Madison. Went to school here in '69. It's probably the first time I saw Warner Park. You know, coming in from the north side, from our little town up in the center part of the state on my motorcycle for college. It was a very different town. Tons of giant elm trees. Did you know about that? We had tons of elms and they all died of Dutch elm. So hence, poof, that everybody's interested in the environment, that these things change. And you say, what happened to the elms? Well, they got Dutch elm. So along Warner Park, there were elms. Down East Washington, it was solid elms. Campus was huge elms. And times have changed. The one tree that stayed is the oaks. But I remember Warner Park, but I didn't know much about it back then, because what you see from the road is sort of the developed side, what I call managed surface side. It's games, it's buildings, it's playgrounds with lights. The wild side is kind of tucked back in. And so then I got reconnected with it when moved back to town here in the 80s. My wife and I lived over on the east side here, just off Willie Street, real funky, fun neighborhood. And her mother moved here from Chicago when she retired, where we live now, actually, after she passed away. And so it's been right up the road. And so we got in there a little more and a little more, but really very little. Really didn't know much about it. It was kind of this magic kingdom back in there somewhere. And we had no idea how big it was, for example. It's over 200 acres, of which over half is, relatively natural area. It's pretty amazing. So then in the 80s, I was pretty busy doing computer work and other things and working at the state unemployment and then consulting on the side. And not a big focus on the environment, but was certainly interested and, participated in some city council meetings trying to prevent housing being developed by Indian Lake was one of our favorite places. Most nature we all thought of as out of town, right? And we could get out of town sometimes, and we had the means to do it and the time. And then we go testify at those things. Then I got on the Audubon board in the 90s, and we thought more about this stuff, but it always bothered me that not that what we were doing wasn't good. What we were doing was wonderful, saving farmland north of Madison and over east, Fayetteville Grove, historic prairie restorations, Elder Leopold's original projects. And that was wonderful, but it was very hard to look at urban nature and say, why aren't we saving nature right here? It is disappearing. The elms went. And how did we respond to that? So about when I retired, then you have time to focus on things more. And a group called Wild Warner started, I can't tell you the exact date, but it was friends of mine, including the woman who started the class that you and I participate in, this Capstone Nelson Institute class that I helped mentor. And really, that was when my more engagement started, and I got onto the board. There was a new Wild Warner board. And they originally refused to call themselves a friends group because the whole point was, we're not friends of parks. We're here to oppose all the bad things parks is doing to our beloved natural areas. One of the first things I testified on was the Upper Prairie, which I think you've seen, and went to a Parks Commission meeting and said, we love Warner Park. It's got a lot of nature worth preserving. I've been on the Audubon board. That was my personal testimony. And I held up a little bird. It wasn't this one, but it was in fact, I didn't have a fuzzy bird to hold up. It was a woodcock. And woodcocks come through in the spring, and they are funny little call. And morning and evening, they'll do these flights over what they call essentially leks. It's areas where they gather and do their sky dance. It's a magical thing. It's almost like prairie chickens, that some of these charismatics, these birds that the public just loves, like bluebirds, right? We all love bluebirds and eagles and robins. Well, woodcocks, most people don't know. So I brought a little football, duct taped a pencil to its nose and said, this is a woodcock, and I played it on my, whatever I had at the time. I think it was a cell phone. And, because I had them real early because I was doing consulting. And the guy who was head of the Parks Commission at the time just laughed, and he said, "That's my favorite bird." And we saved the meadow. And I not single-handedly, but we all testified. This is the kind of thing. So the Wild Warner group formed to try to save things like that from being overdeveloped, what nature is left. That was my connection. And then the huge project was, there used to be a 4th of July. The whole place was managed. You couldn't even replant trees that were being lost, old oaks and things, around the Warner Park Pond Lagoon. And I always called it Warner Pond because it sounds like Walden Pond, because that triggers nice thoughts. Lagoon sounds like someplace you run runoff, right? Which is how it was being treated. And there was an island there, still there. And the whole purpose was manage that area for once a year. Thousands of people come. It's a happy time, 4th of July. Picnic with your family, drink beer, listen to music, and watch huge fireworks. Biggest ones this side of the Mississippi, believe it or not. That's what I understand anyway. On that island, once a year, the whole ecosystem was managed to make sure that event was possible. And when we tried to say, hey, went out in our kayaks and collected the trash that fell out of the sky from those huge fireworks right into the lagoon. There's layers of it still in there. And showed plastic bags full of it at city council meetings and stuff. That gave parks, and I've always been an ally of parks. I want to work with. What ethics means, you work with multiple people automatically. It isn't just who's going to win, us versus them. It's like, where do we come together on principles of fairness and science, right? Just like we face today. So I hope I'm not digressing too far. That was my first connection. And one of the things that came up was from being on Audubon board, I was aware that you dump, even, I said at one of the first meetings I went to, I said, if I dumped a wheelbarrow full of sand in there, I'd be fined for dumping sand in a wetland. They're hauling in truckloads every year to put the fireworks in the sand, right? Well, it turns out the DNR did care, among other things, and parks did. And we sort of gave parks a public face that said, no, there's a public interest in not always having just fireworks here. Let's manage this as an ecosystem. Today, it's called Firebird Island Prairie. It restores from the ashes of the fireworks. Firebird Island and Firebird Island Prairie. Really pleased with that. So that was the first big connection that I personally had, aside from that other testimony and whatnot, and then have stayed engaged with Wild Warner, which is how a community member can, on some regular basis, support or participate in nice things to help save the natural areas in our parks, and in Warner Park specifically, in this case. So does that kind of answer it? Your questions about engagement? That was the first engagement.
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you. Were you talking about Rhythm and Booms?
Rhythm and Booms was very popular. I found out that Madison Police Department and Fire Department spent months, and city staff months, planning just for that event every year. And it was a huge traffic snarl and etc. And if parks and nature are managed around events, or even, once a year events especially, it isn't really all that good for the environment then, because it takes priority over saying, what happens the other 365 days a year in this place? Nobody knew. It was sort of off the radar. So we've tried to put it on the radar. What's happening in Warner Park in the middle of January. And that led to part of Madison becoming a bird city when I was still on the Audubon board. Some visionary people, including Karen Etter Hale, who was our office director at Madison Audubon at the time, who was now retired, I understand, but I think still very much involved in statewide Audubon and always has been, came in and some people said, let's start a program called Bird City. Cities that put some priority on treating all neighborhoods, all parks, all habitats, urban habitats, as something special. We just recently, something passed that we advocated all along called Bird Safe Glass. This is now an ordinance in Madison. It took a long time, as you can see here, because we started this, I think, Pete Cannon, who was president of the Audubon, Pete and Marcia, just talked to Marcia the other day, both were president at one time, and Pete, kudos, kept pursuing this and others. So Audubon came into play, and we said, what can we do with this Bird City thing? What I did with it was, after I was on the Audubon board, wasn't on Audubon board anymore, I was on Wild Warner, Also got on the board of Friends of Lakeshore Preserve. Somebody said, would you like to do this? Partly because of engagement in this class that you are in right now that I help facilitate. What happens at Lakeshore Preserve that's of interest to the community, the broader community, as well as the scientific and the educational community? And we said, how can we engage people here? Because most people don't even know this exists, and what you don't know about, you don't value. So we want to add community value, hence creating community with people, birds, and nature. I probably made that sign 10 years ago, and still use it. We formed a coalition called Madison Fun. It kind of evolved. Friends of Urban Nature. My wife came up with it because we said it has to spell something fun. And she said, how about fun? And so kudos to Barb for that one. And we started Bird City as a coalition and went to the city and said, sign on. The city to this day has not put up the Bird City signs because people in whatever levels of offices or planning don't like too many signs. So it's sort of crazy sometimes when you look at it. How come Madison can't even put up a Bird City sign? It's still on our agenda. But what we did do, and with full partnership and leadership actually from Madison Parks, is start these bird nature outings, 100 a year. Actually, we started with 50 a year in 4 major parks, including Warner Park, back on focus. Center point of it, Warner Park. What can we do regularly here for families and kids who live in the neighborhood, who don't even get to Indian Lake? There's urban nature right out the back door if we save it, and if we enjoy it in a manner that doesn't wreck the nature being enjoyed, or put more positively, and I like how somebody else put this, enjoying nature doing its thing. We said, let's do regular outings where it's not just a once a year special school outing or something. We still want to do all those. And these various groups listed at the bottom here, all of these groups, I don't know if you can read that or if it's reversed, but it's Madison Parks, actually this one doesn't have the whole list, but it's a long list of partners. Friends of Cherokee Marsh, I'm on that board too. Friends of Starkweather Creek on the east side. Friends of Olin Turville, and etc. Edna Taylor now. And in those partnerships, we started getting more partners, like the Aldo Leopold Nature Center helps publish and publicize and facilitate the walks at Aldo Leopold / Edna Taylor. They're contiguous. So you get the idea. There's a chance here to work with Parks publicity staff and Parks recreation staff. I love Ann Shea and Tracy Hartley. And so we started doing this. The other things we started doing were at Warner Park specifically, and I can't find my poster right now, but we do an annual, maybe I do have one, an annual Bird and Nature Festival. Where did I put the poster here? Oh boy. Anyway, here's the spreadsheet. There's like 20 or 30 different groups that come, and we do free tables. We were used to doing environment group tables, free tables at things like Garden Expo. I did a lot of those tables for Audubon. Why don't we have our own thing as part of Bird City? So we kicked off Bird City, I think it was in 2013, the Bird Nature Festival, okay? And that was at Warner Park. And we had some nice speakers, including Trish O'Kane, who helped start this class, was a featured speaker, about why are we interested in this? Why is it important to bring kids to Warner Park, especially socioeconomically disadvantaged kids? And the community in general that doesn't know this whole connection with nature is right out their door. And it was wonderful. And then, so we had lots of volunteers, and each one, where did I put the poster for that one? Oh, I know. I've got it right here. I've got a big one. Here's the Bird and Nature outing regular schedule. I can send you an electronic copy of this, Selma. This was the original one, which is only 4 of them. We've since gone to 8 every month. So that was a historic one, but we've kept this logo, Bird and Nature Outings. And for a long time, it started out as Bird and Nature Walks, and it became outings because we also did bikes and canoes. And then it became, as of this year, and I don't have the new posters yet, but it's now Bird and Nature Adventures. Because with COVID and other things, we're saying every day is a Bird and Nature adventure in Warner Park and in these other parks. And you are part of that now. as part of Anka's birding class and Nature Explorers, creating fun things families and kids can do any day. And they're seasonal. To some extent, they might be location specific, like where could I take a walk at Warner Park? And you pull out the wonderful a Warner Park map and say, look at all that blue, look at all that green.
Mm-hmm.
They actually do represent natural areas in this case, most of it, except for the piece up in this corner, which is called the Duck Pond, except it's actually the Mallard Stadium. It's not actually ducks. This is the Duck Pond. And right here is Firebird Island, for example. And so I just sent you an electronic copy of that, of this map, so you've got that.
Yep.
So the Bird City Festival, back to that, this was the one in 2020 that we scheduled and weren't able to do, so we'll do it in 2021. And it has a featured speaker, live raptors. You can't beat live animals. And then that whole spreadsheet work of groups comes and has fun kids activities and tables, and UW students participate, including like Student Sierra, as well as the class that you're in, where they have time. Not everybody's here or has time when we do this normally in April, around Earth Day. And we actually have gotten blizzards, and we had like, the most we've had is like 1,000 people came, and it's free. All of these activities are free for the public. And then even in the blizzard, we had 300 people come, and there was like 18 inches of snow we had to shovel. And we mostly met inside the Rainbow Shelter and right around it. We had some outdoor activities that featured snow and tracks, for example. So those activities went on at Warner, and then it kind of came to a point where we said, who's leading all of these nature walks, etc. Okay? And we have different, it started with school naturalists who have a focus of a busload of school kids goes to the school forest. Do you know that model? Have you ever done that? Okay. For a lot of kids in school, this is their only big nature experience in school, which is the school, not kickball once a week and not school nature outing once a week like it is for kickball or football or basketball, or maybe even more than that. It's nature recreation and education happen on one big outing, which is 50 kids get on a school bus or whatever the number is. They go to the school forest, they get off, have a great time. These people called school naturalists who lead a lot of these outings originally and still do some, like my friend Julie Melton, who led a small COVID-safe unofficial walk, because we're not doing official walks now, at Alda Leopold and Edna Taylor yesterday, featuring a scavenger hunt of all the fun things you could find. So that was great fun. And so we're back to that point. We're trying to do something every day now in Warner Park that's fun to do. And you know about this because the class is helping create that.
Yeah. Thank you. You kind of touched on this. I grew up kind of on the north side of Madison, so I know like the neighborhoods are a little bit lower socioeconomic. Like there's a lot of like condos and everything. So I would just want to ask, like, why do you think it's like, why is it important for like these families and children to have like such a big natural outlet such as Warner Park in their neighborhoods?
All the studies that have been done. I mean, if you take it, whoops, I don't have it right here. I thought I usually have a copy of Bringing Nature Home and Last Child in the Woods sitting right here. Academically, and I'm saying not ivory tower academics, but field academics. This is all about field stuff. What do people do in their own communities? What happens in nature in places like urban parks? The importance is taken for granted often. You know, the kids have a safe place to play, and the people have a safe place to go relax and maybe ride a bike, maybe run, maybe play soccer. But at any rate, someplace that has some beauty and it's a shared space. Ethically, that shared space is almost as important as the fact that it's nature. Just having some shared space. You don't have to pay to be there. Anybody can do it, and it's not necessarily competition where the teams play and you watch. It's actually participatory. It's very participatory. So it's caught on, and there's a lot of I'm kind of curious, did you ever get into the nature side of Warner Park when you were a kid?
No, my only experience was it was like the playground area, because my dad would go and play basketball almost like once a week. So that was
right. Yeah.
I was like stuck in the more like
right by
field.
Troy Drive there, kind
Yeah.
of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I know that well. Yeah, I think that's critical. In fact, I think the start of engaging communities with the nature around us starts with having fun things to do adjacent to it that are compatible with essentially the nature doing its thing next to you, like the cranes and the frogs. We don't pave the frog pond. As an example, right there, there's an area between the playground and basketball. And I play basketball there. The area between that and Warner Pond is actually a nice little kind of a marsh now. There's a lot of cattails and a few big old trees. That was preserved. They were looking at just filling that in like they do everything else. We said, no, that's nice to save some of that. Put Bluebird House over there, etc. So we're trying to do both. I think that there's a huge need for that. I would actually personally, and I'm not speaking for Wild Warner, love to see a splash park up near Warner Park Center, or a pool, and ideally an indoor pool because it's Wisconsin. We need community access to these things. If you have enough money, all of these things are accessible. If you don't, it's very much a stark line. It's like, I grew up on a family farm with no money. I literally lived in a log cabin until I was 5. Literally, not a cute one. Just what was there from the 1800s. Literally, outdoor toilets. No running water. I know what it's like to grow up poor, but also happy if you have space to play and you can do all those things. So we didn't feel poor. We had access to nice things. You could always play outside. So having the community access to things that are accessible like that, I think, has been now documented many times over. Good for personal health, especially for kids. Mental health, physical health, emotional health, learning, the health of their ability to learn. Because instead of go read a book, somebody else figured all this out, now you try to memorize it, it's go explore. You can be the person that discovers it. What do you find interesting here? And I can state for a fact that when I was a kid, growing up in school, starting from the 60s, I thought everything was known. I thought, all the birds are in the bird book, and everything you need to know had been researched already, and that's way far from the truth. So there's a role to play for an education too. So field education, as opposed to hard science, has gotten short shrift. So I think part of that is for the school you went to. Which school did you go to? Did you go to?
I went to Blackhawk Middle School, and then that was the middle school I went to, and I went to Lindbergh Elementary School.
Okay. Did they have any classes outside or get anything out like that?
The only thing I can really remember was at my elementary school, we would maybe once or twice a month we would walk down to Cherokee Marsh, which was like right down the right down the street, and we would. I remember like we planted trees one time, and then the other time we would go and like pick out the one invasive species. I forget the name. The one that sounds like mustard or
garlic mustard, probably. Mustard. That's a fun one. You show one to a kid, and you say, "Go to town," and it's just great. You pull a bunch, and that's frankly a form of recreation. I see it. They all call that restoration work, and I'm like, don't call it work. People who do it because they really enjoy it. It's fun. Is the tree still there that you helped plant? Do you know?
I don't know, but I'm sure it is. I hope it is.
But literally, you are rooted in the community when you do something like that, So at Warner, one of the things that I'm real pleased that happened was the kids that grow up along, not Sheridan, the other side there, Trails Way. It's been tough. It's been tough. It's assisted housing, etc., and there's some crime, and I like to say, hey, there's crime in Loyal. You just don't. The town I grew up in, you just don't hear about it. There were some real, I'll be frank, badasses. You get that in a community, and there has to be some sense of a framework of support around you where you feel safe. I frankly didn't feel safe when I was a kid because so many people had guns. Even though I hunted with a .22, I was uncomfortable. There were groups that had guns that acted like jerks. And that remains true today. I don't care what circumstance you're in. That's just not a fun thing. But it does not mean that defines the community. That's a beautiful community to live in. And even more so now along Trailsway because with encouragement from Wild Warner and others, the concrete cunette, the drainage ditch that flushed the trash from along North North Sherman and the shopping center, just flushed it all right down into the Warren Lagoon, and that's just a fact. I mean, we found tons of junk in there and pulled it out. Was restored back to an open creek as opposed to dumping it into a drainage pipe. All of a sudden the life returned, and then you get back to that theme. Do I hear and feel life around me? You know, it brings joy to our lives. So back to that last child in the park, or last child in the woods, this classes that you are in and that I help with, is actually called Last Child in the Park. That's the name of it, and it's named right purposely after Last Child in the Woods, which assumes there's a woods someplace else, not necessarily right by your house. So I don't know how this is going to go. I know there are certainly questions that come up about how people feel welcome in natural areas, and I think that's has changed already. It's like I was at Warner Park on Sunday helping lead the walk on behalf of my friend, another master naturalist, student of mine actually, named Lynn Pearson, and I think I copied you on the activity that she had. It was a fall birds at Warner Park, okay? And so you can refer to that from this video. We went for a walk, and it was mixed demographics again. I'm talking not just the people who came for the walk, and usually that includes families, kids, minorities, almost all the time. It's been a major goal of these bird and nature outings, and it does do it. Whereas our typical Audubon outings, bless their hearts, or bless the hearts of everybody involved, and I'm a huge supporter of Audubon, the bird outings in particular were very much people who would get up at 6 in the morning and had binoculars in cars and could drive somewhere, right? I mean, you got to have some of that, and you got to have some of this. So we're trying to open that door. So that part does work. I would mention at this point, before I forget, the other program that we do at Warner Park as the host site that's wonderful is in partnership, and I really believe ethically in the power of partnerships. They don't have to be a hierarchy or a control structure or even share the same budget. You know, each organization is its own little, you know, budget and area. There is Madison Parks, then there's Dane County Parks, and then there's Madison Audubon, and there's Sierra Club, and there's the Goodman Community Center, etc. All of these have helped sponsor these outings and activities, including they help sponsor a master with the DNR and UW Extension, where I used to teach computer classes for adults. We do master naturalist classes. You can be that's somebody petting a bee that somebody took the picture in class. Personal growth, career enhancement, environmental engagement, special focus. Our particular class that we host at Warner Park has a special focus on urban natural areas and connecting kids with nature because it's so important. And we do it's 6 Saturdays, so people who are working stiffs can participate. And we've had everything from college students to retirees and retired emeritus professors who know way more about it than anything I know. But so Julie Melton and I and Anka, who teaches the class, have helped facilitate this, what we call the FUN, Friends of Urban Nature Master Naturalist class. So Warner Park provides facilities, the City Parks Department and Warner Park Facility Management provide facilities for free, which is really important for this kind of shoestring operation. We don't have our own building, our own nature center. In fact, Madison doesn't really have its own nature center. Their Aldo Leopold Nature Center is wonderful, it provides some. The Arboretum from the UW provides certain programming and activities as a public space, which is wonderful. But that's a little remote, frankly, both of those, for large chunks of, especially the north side and central Madison and east side. So where's our nature center? So what they are is, when we do things like this, we're able to use, by partnering, to use Warner Park as a sort of the host nature center site. And we bring in a lot of fuzzy birds and posters and make it into a nature center during the training. And then we take classes, take the students, master naturalist students, to urban parks and urban natural areas, and have people like David Drake, the guy at the UW doing the urban canid study of coyotes and foxes, and how do they accommodate us and how do we accommodate them. He teaches a segment, and Stan Temple who was a marvelous guy who used to be head of the Nelson Institute or director of some way there. He took Alda Leopold's chair, as I understand it. He helps teach his class. And it's hard science, some of it, but it's all field science. It's focused on getting out there and seeing it. On this coming Sunday, David Michelson, credit where due, retired professor who never says no. He loves to help with things like this. He helps teach the Master Naturalist class. He's the guy on here in November 1, David Michelson, Ice Age Geology at Cherokee Marsh. You've seen Cherokee Marsh, right? Did you know that used to be a 300-foot deep canyon? Isn't that nuts?
Oh, that is.
This is all like infield post-Ice Age or over several Ice Ages or whatever. It's huge. It's huge. I mean, when you understand what's beneath your feet, it changes how you look at what's here today. And it explains what's here today a little bit. And then you have more recent history like Native American history, like Native American mounds in some of these parks. So it's not just the nature, it's like respecting the place, respecting the geology, the ecosystem that evolved there, the human societies that evolved there over time. And how they interacted is, of course, important. But we also don't want to write it off. It's like my own dad, bless his heart, very kind guy, loved everybody. But he just couldn't believe Native Americans could have survived in Wisconsin. He just refused to believe. He said it's too hard. And I'm like, we lived in a log cabin with no running water. Why couldn't they? You know, he grew up in that. You know, it wasn't so. Anyway, we live and learn, and it opens our eyes to things. So I just find that part of it, the part about helping people see these things from these different perspectives. Today, the popular word is lenses. What lens do you look at this thing through? And to me, that starts with understanding what you can see when you look closer at something through binoculars, you know, that kids can afford. What happens when you listen? And I've got these sound scopes that kids could actually afford, even a poor family, for Christmas. And I'm speaking like when I was a kid, we didn't get much. But you could get one of these little things and go outside and listen to everything that's going on. So you try to open that door. And those lenses then start to go into things like, what is the history of this place? And it's absolutely fascinating, both ecologically and human. So, anyway, Warner's a place to do it. It provides all of that. It's kind of cool. I don't know the whole history of Warner Park real well myself. You can probably find more on that online. I should know it better. But we have people who lead history walks. We have Mike Ruey and Sean Gear who lead tree walks. We have students like you who help put together other fun things that people can go and do. So.
Thank you, Paul. So now I was wondering, or hoping that you could, you kind of touched on most of the questions. So now I was hoping you could, like, kind of list the different areas of Warner Park and like, you know, there's a dog park. You talked about the